Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I hope that, sorry, I just was on earlier and I thought that I was doing a live. Then when I got off, I realized that I had just spoken for a good probably 10 minutes and that I wasn't actually live. So I hope this is working. I hope you can see me. Today I wanted to talk about the downsides of porn that I don't think that we talk about enough. And so I posted a question to my Facebook feed. I think it was yesterday. I don't know. All the days run together sometimes. And so sometimes I forget when I posted things. But you can go back and scroll through and just figure out. I was asking about, do you feel like porn is something that you need to have discussions about, and the usage of it, and when and why and how and whatnot with your partner? And do you think that that's something that you should be talking about, type thing? And, for the most part, I think most people have this idea that, it's not that big of a deal, that everyone does it, that it's so normalized that we don't really talk about the downsides to it. And we don't really consider that it could be an addiction for some people. So much like, when they talked about alcohol for years, there was even there'd be an article, it seemed like every other day, that, red wine was good for this, and, having a beer would be good for that. And they would tote the health benefits of alcohol. And now we're finding out that, no, really, it's really bad for you. But we still don't talk about that enough. However, we've normalized it so much that, even when people started to talk about it more openly, about the negative impacts of alcohol on their lives, on their families, and on their own health and whatnot, it still was, it's still something that happens to other people, right? And yet I grew up in a household where, alcoholism was a part of my life. And so I remember being, pretty young and making a conscious decision that I didn't want to have that kind of relationship with alcohol. And so I had to be really conscious of not, right? So, but that was also my fear that I had of maybe I carry the gene that makes me more, likely to be addicted to alcohol. At least, that's what we thought back in the day, right? So, whether you believe in epigenetics or, whether you believe that there's genetic components to a lot of these addictions or not, the reality is that some people do become more addicted to one thing versus another. And I can remember reading Dr. Gabor Mate's book. A lot of his books were, but I think the one where the realm of the in the realm of hungry ghosts, I believe is the title, in the realm of hungry ghosts. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But he talks about how when he spoke to addicts about why they chose their particular drug of choice, it was because for the person who used that particular drug, there was a feeling that came with it, and it often had to do with, comfort or soothing or escape. It offered some sort of salve to their pain, right? So, for each individual person, it's going to be a different salve. So for the person who's addicted to pornography, they didn't choose it, but they chose it in a way, in the sense that when they tried it and recognized that this soothes a certain part of me, or this does something for me that I'm not able to get elsewhere, then it makes sense, right? And so whether you believe that this is a real addiction or not, and there's some controversy among scientists whether it meets the criteria, but when you go onto WebMD and you read their list of things that are worrisome signs to look for, they sound very much similar to other signs of addiction for other things like alcohol or drugs, right? So just insert the word alcohol or drugs instead of porn, and it would still be the same, right? So porn becomes a central part of your life. You stop doing things you really enjoy so that you can see more of it. I mean, if you put alcohol becomes a central part of your life, it still rings true, right? You neglect personal care. You lose interest in other activities. You become less interested in social encounters, right? So you're doing with less connection in real life in order to feed this addiction, right? And it's damaging your relationships. You let go of other responsibilities. It affects your job or schoolwork. So you start to dedicate so much energy and time to this thing that takes you out of real life and in engaging in connections with other people in real life, right? And so you're looking at it or watching it in places that aren't appropriate. Excuse me. Such as work or school. So, I mean, I've heard of people actually being fired from their jobs for watching it at work, on their work computer. So that's the thing. We're not making rational choices here. We're not thinking clearly. This is taking on a life of its own when it's starting to impact all of these things, right? Your sex life starts to be unfulfilling, right? So it becomes easier in some ways to just go off and do this by yourself than to have to engage with another person and have to be engaged and present and concerned about their pleasure, right? So it becomes maybe easier to do this. And then you also have a craving for more. So it's never enough, right? That's the thing about addictions, is that it's always going to you're going to keep needing more and more and more to keep feeding that, right? You can't stop looking at or watching porn even when you try. So you'll see, much like other addictions, there will be relapses. And especially if you're just trying to quit cold turkey without any kind of resources or support, then the likelihood of relapse is, that much more. So you can't quit even though you don't enjoy it as much. And so, there comes a point when you're doing it because it's a habit, and you know that you'll get certain results, but it's also not fulfilling enough. It's not meeting the same needs that it used to maybe meet for you. And if you've been heavily looking at or watching porn for 6 months or more. So that's a lot. That's a lot of things that kind of line up with other addictions when we talk about things like alcohol or drugs or whatever. Like just the impacts that it can have on you, your life, your relationships, your job, schooling, all of that, right? So how do we deal with all of that if we're not talking about the impact that these things can have on your relationship? If we're not acknowledging that this is one of the darker sides to porn, and like I've talked about the ethical sourcing of porn and stuff like that, that's another dark side, but this side in particular, I feel like we don't talk about it enough, and we try to sweep it under the rug. And what that does is it really negates the experience of the person who's addicted to these things, as well as the people who are in their lives who are being deeply affected by their loved one's addiction, right? So that if we're saying that it's okay to engage with pornography and that it's normal, like quote unquote normal, that all guys do it, that couples use it and it's healthy, and so that we keep putting this spin on it. What happens is that for the people that are in a relationship where that's not actually the case, when the opposite is true, you can feel really minimizing and invalidating of their actual lived experience, where this thing is not healthy and it's not helping the relationship and it's not something that they can engage in together, and it's actually tearing them apart, and it's making the person who's in the relationship feel unheard and unseen and unworthy and unloved and unlovable, right? So we need to keep that in perspective, that while you might have a healthy relationship with porn, and your relationship itself might have a healthy relationship with porn, your partner might as well. That for a lot of people that's not the case, and I think that we need to acknowledge that and talk about it more, so that it's not just the minimizing language of, oh, it's no big deal, everyone does it, if it's consenting adults and all that stuff. Well, the same can be true for a lot of things that have addictive properties, right? And we don't talk about them in that way anymore, right? So we don't brush off someone's conversation around an alcoholic loved one by saying, everyone drinks, it's not a big deal. We don't say that anymore, right? So we need to stop doing that with pornography use and addiction especially. So I'm curious what you think. I hope this one worked. Sometimes I have technical difficulties, but I hope this was watchable. I hope you could hear what I was saying. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, what resonates with you. And do you know anyone who's had issues with pornography before? Have you been able to support them through that? How has it affected you? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing publicly, you can certainly private message me, and I can answer any questions that you might have without actually revealing your identity. We can just do an anonymous sort of answer to any questions that you might have. So reach out and let's chat. Namaste.